Welcome to another episode of Easy Healthy Bread. This week we're going to make a whole wheat sourdough bread. It's not difficult, but it does take a little more planning. There's actually 2 steps that each take some time that we need to do before we get started mixing the actual bread dough. The first is to create a starter. So that's what I've done here. I have mixed 1½ cups of rye flour, 1½ cups of water, a teaspoon of milk, and 1 single granule of yeast, like a tiny piece of sand in there. I've put it together in this Tupperware. You can see it's kind of a gooey consistency. We're going to leave it on the Tupperware, in my Tupperware on the counter for about 12 hours. I'm actually making this the night before I want to bake my bread. So it's about 8 p.m. right now, and I'm going to be baking my bread at about 5 p.m. tomorrow when I get home from work. So I'm going to do this step now. It's going to be ready in the morning. I'm going to do one more step in the morning. I'm going to add a few things to this, and then we'll get started tomorrow evening. So I'll catch you back at step 2. Good morning. We're back for step 2. So I'm taking a second Tupperware, quite a bit larger than this one, and we're going to take a little bit of our starter and add something to it as well. So we're going to start with 3 cups of whole wheat flour. I've already pre-measured mine, so you can just put that right in. And then 1½ cups of water. And then we're going to add 1½ cups of our starter. So I'm just going to open this up. This is what we made yesterday. You can see it's starting to bubble a little bit, even with just that small amount of yeast. And so there's a ½ cup. And it's a little sticky, so it's going to take a little work to get it out. And you can just see the consistency is like really kind of thick batter is what I would say. And just put that right in. And then a cup of it. Might take a little bit to fill the cup, especially if you use a shallow Tupperware like me. But that will be good. And then if you're planning on using the starter again, you want to feed it. So you're going to want to add back in a 1½ cups of water and a 1½ cups of rye flour. So we're just going to add this in, and I'm going to let it sit on my counter until tonight when we start baking the bread. And I'll see you then when we start mixing things together. Thanks. Okay, so it is the evening. We have our starter ready to go, and we're ready to start mixing this bread together. So you can open your starter up. It's been on my counter since this morning, and if you smell it, it's just going to have a little bit of a sour smell, and that's what's going to give this the sourdough type of flavor. So to our mixing bowl, we are going to add 6 cups of whole wheat flour. I already measured it out. And we are going to take 2 cups of warm water and add 4 teaspoons of yeast that I've already measured out there. To our flour, we're going to add 5 teaspoons of salt. Make sure you get it all in there. And then we're going to add our starter. So I'm going to grab a spatula and be right back to dump this in. So I've got my spatula. The starter, you can see it's kind of a thick consistency, but a little sticky. You can kind of see like that. It's kind of, it has a little bit of stick togetherness, which is the gluten in there. So we're just going to take it and put it right into the bowl. And it's just going to take a second to get it out there. And you might have some stuck at the bottom if you didn't mix it perfectly. Like I didn't. I must have missed this spot when I was mixing mine because there's some flour kind of stuck in there. So you might need to break that up with your spatula so you can incorporate it in. So now that I've got all the starter in my bowl, I'm going to take 2 cups of warm water and the yeast we added and add it right into the bowl. So if you're making this by hand, take a wooden spoon or with your hands, mix it together, and then start kneading it out on your counter. It's probably going to take at least 20 to 25 minutes of hand kneading. You just want to make sure that when you're done, it passes the window pane test, which we've talked about before. And you can look back on old episodes for that. I think the previous 2 episodes mentioned the window pane test. If you're doing it in a mixer, it's probably going to take about 10 to 15 minutes of kneading on the mixer. Again, just check it after probably about 10 minutes and see where you are, and then if it's not ready yet, knead it for maybe another 4 to 5 minutes and check it again every 4 to 5 minutes after that. So I'm going to put mine on the mixer, and after it's done mixing and has passed the window pane test, I'm going to put it in a warm, draft-free place. I'm actually going to warm up my oven to about 90 degrees. I do that by just preheating it for a couple minutes and leaving my oven light on and testing it with my instant read thermometer. So I'm going to put this right in the oven at 90 degrees for about an hour and a half as soon as it's done kneading. So I'll catch you back then. Okay, we're back. So you can see from my bowl here that the bread has risen quite a bit. It's been in a warm, draft-free place, which is my oven, for about 90 minutes. And to check and see that it had risen enough, what I did was I dipped my finger in some water, poked it in, and it didn't fill in at all. If you want to catch it right before the dough starts to sigh, which is if you poke it, it kind of deflates a little bit. But if it does that, it's fine, it's risen enough. You just want to make sure the hole isn't filling in when you poke your finger in. So we're going to shape these into some medium-sized loaves. I have some parchment paper laid down here, and we're going to put about 2 loaves on each parchment paper. I think this is probably going to make about 6 medium-sized loaves is what I'm aiming for here. So take off any jewelry, get your hands wet. I've just got a bowl with some water here. Kind of rub the water around, get your hands nice and wet. Try and have the water be warm if possible. And just grab some dough. So you'll see it's going to start to deflate, but that's fine. It's what is meant to happen. So I'm going to kind of dole out 6 even pieces so I know how much I want in each one. I would normally maybe weigh it if I really wanted to be exact, but it's kind of hard with the bowl. So feel free to keep your hands wet. And then I have another piece of parchment here. And we are just going to shape these into what is called a hearth loaf or a freeform loaf. And that just means it is going to be a loaf, but it's not going to be in a loaf pan. We are going to shape it and just bake it. I'm going to bake them right on the parchment paper on a baking stone. And so the crust gets nice and crispy, which is great for a dough like this because a dough like this doesn't have any sort of softeners in the dough. So the crust will get nice and crispy. We'll bake it with steam, which we did with those French rolls that we made last week. And it just has really that sourdough flavor, but all the health of whole wheat. So you can see I've got 6 pieces going here. And then I have a little bit left in my bowl, so I'm just going to split it evenly as I can by eye between each one. And it is a fairly sticky recipe, but that's fine. We just know that our dough is not going to be dense. It's going to be nice and light. You always want it under-floured rather than over-floured. So just keep your fingers wet if you need, if it's sticking to you. Mine's not sticking too bad. You can see I've got a little going on me. And you might need a spatula to get some that's stuck on the sides, but it's not too bad. Okay, so it looks like we've got about 6 even pieces here, and we're just going to shape them into little loaves. It's a pretty simple shaping process. Let me put my bowl aside here. So I'm actually only want to have 2 per parchment. So I'm going to have to lay out another sheet of parchment for the 5th and 6th loaf. So I'm going to grab some tools I need to shape these loaves, and I'll be right back. So I went ahead and refilled my bowl of water, because you're going to want your hands to be wet again, and got this bench scraper, and that's just to get the dough off my parchment and to not waste any. So this is going to make it easier to get the sticky dough off my parchment and into my hands. So there we go, we got one here. It goes in there, wet both hands. So what we're going to do is essentially just a bigger version of the shaping we've done for rolls in the past. So we're just going to take the top and fold it down. Take the top and fold it down. And around a quarter turn each time until we've got a roll, and then I'm actually going to elongate mine a tiny bit, like this. And then I'm just going to set it onto my parchment. So now we're just going to do that again with this dough. So we'll just grab it off the parchment. And if you don't want it to get stuck to your parchment, what you can do is just do this straight out of the bowl. I kind of wanted to see how much each one was, because since it was so full in the dough, I couldn't quite see how much was in there as far as how much each one needed to be. But if that's not important to you, or you're making them larger, you can just shape it right out of the bowl. You don't need to set it down first. So here we go, just turning and shaping this way and going around. You see it's not sticking to me too bad because my hands are wet, but if it starts sticking, just re-moisten your hands. And then making it a little bit oblong just by kind of rolling it in my hands a little bit and stretching it. Like that. So this one's a little even more oblong than this one. So I'm going to set this on my parchment. And I'm going to go ahead and shape the rest of these. They are going to need to rest for about an hour before they go in the oven. Halfway through that, about half an hour before they're ready to bake, preheat your oven to 450 degrees. After that hour is up, we're going to steam them when we cook them. So you remember from the French bread recipe that I took a Pyrex pie dish, filled it with about a tray full of ice cubes, and slipped that in there when I slipped the rolls in at that time. So we're going to do that exact same method. I'll get that all set up in an hour, and I'll show you what it looks like before we pop them in. Okay, we're back. These have been rising on my counter for about an hour. You can see they've grown a little bit and they're nice and puffy now. So what I'm going to do to prepare these for baking is I'm going to slash them. So I have a paper towel that I have sitting in some water. I'm just going to wipe down the knife blade. I'm using my serrated bread knife just so they don't stick. I made 3 that were more circle and 3 that were more oblong just to kind of mix it up. So I'm going to do a different pattern on the oblong compared to the circle. So the circle, I'm going to do just an X. You want it to be about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. So I'll go and do the first part of the X, like that. Just a smooth movement. And if it sticks a little, it's fine. It doesn't need to be perfect. And then I'm just going to re-moisten my blade here. For the oblong ones, I'm going to do a 3 slashes on the diagonal, like this. And if they start to stick, just get your blade wet again. And this is just going to help them raise in the oven to the shape that I want. So I have prepared this pie pan with ice, and I'm going to put it in when I put these in also. I just need to move it out of my way right now so I can do the other side of these. Just kind of have to figure out what works so you don't accidentally cut a different one while you're trying to cut one. So just do the best you can there. You can, of course, go over it a little bit if you feel the need to make it a little deeper. But don't be afraid to get in there. The bread's not going to die if you slash it too much. It's probably more likely you'll under than over slash things. So just make sure that they're about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch thick, or deep, I should say. So these are ready for the oven now. I've preheated my oven to 450 degrees. I'm going to bake them at 450 degrees for 15 minutes, and then I'm going to turn my oven down to 350. When I put these in, I'm also going to put this ice in at the same time, and then I'm going to keep baking them until the internal temperature reads about 210 degrees. Then I'm going to check with my instant read thermometer. So we'll be back to wrap this up after they've been baked. Okay, so I've just pulled my rolls out of the oven, and they look fantastic. I'm really excited. They have that crackling crust, which you can hear, but they're nice and soft on the inside, and they have the beautiful design from slashing them. It's very decorative, but it also does help control how they expand in the oven. I'm just going to cool these in my wire rack until they are completely cool before cutting them open. And then to store, I'm going to wrap them up in saran wrap and then foil, or you can put them in a airtight Tupperware. Those work really great if you have one that's about the size of a roll. And they'll last in the fridge or the freezer. In the freezer, they'll last up to 6 months. In the fridge, they'll last probably 2 weeks. Because we have that sourdough starter in there, it helps to ferment the starter because it is a natural preservative. So having the sourdough in there not only lends a slightly tang, sourdough type of flavor to this whole wheat bread, but also helps with that preservation so the bread does not go stale too fast. Perfect for something that you want to keep around. I made a double batch just for that reason. So it's been great showing you this whole wheat sourdough bread, and I hope you've enjoyed the recipe. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and check out the full recipe and all the tips at www.easyhealthybread.com. Thanks for watching.